This is Andy Crouch from All About Beer. I wanted to take a moment to thank Dust Bowl Brewing for becoming our latest underwriter. With a spirit born decades ago in Oklahoma, the Central California brewery started with Hops of Wrath IPA and grew into an award-winning regional brewery with 4 locations. The folks at Dust Bowl appreciate the importance of supporting beer journalism, and their financial support helps us pay our writers, illustrators, and photographers. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. This week, it's another panel recorded at Little Beer 6, the great festival hosted by Goodword Brewing. In a moment, you'll hear Don Tse interview some really smart folks on Adjunct Brewing. But first, I've been talking about this on the show for a while. You hear Andy at the cold open of the shows. The way we're able to keep bringing original content to the beer industry and to curious beer drinkers is through your support. We've created an affordable underwriting program that is easy on your budget, helps you get visibility, and is an altruistic way to directly fund writers, photographers, and editors. Please visit allaboutbeer.com/support to learn more and to sign up. When you're at the website, poke around, read some of the recent articles, go back through the archives, and tune into other podcasts like Brewer to Brewer, the All About Beer podcast, and One Iconic Beer. You won't be disappointed. And you can follow us on social media at All About Beer to keep up with everything else we have going on. All right, let's get into it. There was a time when adjunct meant cheap beer. One of America's largest breweries even paid millions of dollars to run television commercials during the Super Bowl, accusing another of America's largest breweries of using worse adjuncts than they themselves used. Oh, what a world. But for craft breweries, an ingredient is an ingredient. What if adjuncts added flavor? What if adjuncts actually cost more than malted barley? What if adjuncts could tell a story of time and place? Corn and rice aren't cheap anymore. They have a history, they tell a story, and good breweries know how to use ingredients to tell the story of great beer. So here's Don Tse sitting in the host seat and his introduction of his panelists that is so good, I'm going to keep it in so you can hear the answers to his very important first question.
All right, welcome everybody to the next education session at Little Beer 6. My name is Don Tse, better known as the Don of Beer. I will ask each of you to introduce yourselves, name, brewery, and favorite animal.
My name's Tom Beckmann, owner and head brewer of Goldfinger Brewing Company, just outside of Chicago, and my favorite animal is a tiger.
Oh, nice.
My name is Chris Piscitello. I'm the COO and brewer of Wooden Robot Brewery in Charlotte, North Carolina. My favorite animal is a penguin.
Oh, nice.
I'm Doug Reiser, co-founder and CSO of Burial Beer Company in Asheville, North Carolina. My favorite animal is... I've never been asked this question.
Human, you could say human.
Dude, red-tailed hawk, right?
Red-tail, of course.
All right. Badass animal.
Why didn't everybody think of that before Doug? So I think that for a long time, everybody associated adjuncts with cheap beer. You know, certainly the mass market domestic lagers, they're not using corn and rice for flavor. It's a cheap carbohydrate. So how do you tell a story with adjuncts in beer? How do you overcome? And what do consumers say? You know.
I think there's ways that you can harness the power of adjuncts in a beer and express a unique quality of it, particularly on like the body front. So there's a reason that adjuncts are used in macro beers. It helps kind of thin out the body, but it also helps create this kind of crispness. So I don't think that it's a bad thing to be making a beer that might have that kind of really high drinkability. I think what matters more is how do you tell the story of how you actually use that adjunct in the beer and why it matters, because it could actually add significant time to your brew day, depending on how you're using it. In our case, we're doing cereal mashes with adjuncts that we use, and so that's adding at least an hour to the brew day. But we do it to preserve some of that freshness, and it just kind of shows that it's not actually a departure from what we do. Even though it's not a malted barley, we're still dedicating the time necessary to extract exactly what we want to express that beer that way. So it's not a dirty word.
Not a dirty word. Chris?
No, I would agree with that 100%. For us, we lean so heavily into the locality of our malt and a lot of things we get. So, for example, in our Mexican lager, we're using, heirloom grown malted corn from a local maltster. And, I think with that, you're kind of telling a story of the history of some of these beers. You have, German brewers coming over in the 1800s, and they're using what's available. They're using corn, they're using rice. And then you have, the macro brewers that have been using this in that tradition, and it kind of gets perverted. And, craft kind of put that to the side. Well, the big guys are doing it, so it's wrong, And I think it was that way until, 2013, 2014, when we kind of changed that definition. And I think using what's available to us and what's around to make the best beers that we can, I think that's just a natural thing to do as a brewer. It's something that at Wooden Robot we've leaned on forever. Whether that's locally malted corn, locally malted Carolina Gold rice, those adjuncts that we use, not to cheapen the beer or to cut corners, but because hey, this is giving me a specific flavor. This is lessening the body, or in some case sharpening other flavors of the hops. I think it's very important. So we use adjuncts all the time across all styles of beers that we make, and I don't think there's anything bad about that.
Yeah. Doug?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, adjuncts are an important part of burial across the board. I mean, outside of lagers as well, into farmhouse ales and even into hoppy beers. We probably use adjuncts more often than most of the brewers that we work with in hoppy beers, in ales as well. I would love to be the brewer to sit up here and say it's always local, and it's not. I love local. I'm very extremely inspired by local grain people in North Carolina that are bringing back Tuxedo corn, which is a corn that I adore, that Dave at Farm and Sparrow in Asheville had spearheaded growing a lot and getting it malted at Epiphany Malting. And then the green Oaxacan corn that Epiphany also does, and we work with that a lot. We also work with Riverbend's corns quite a bit. And there's also commodity Midwest corn. And
Yellow Dent.
I just want to be that guy that just sits up here and can't eschew his upbringing. And the fact I grew up in a small town in Ohio, middle of nowhere. People lived off of corn and soybeans, and that was life where I grew up. And experientially, the reason I make particularly our house Mexican lager that I love is because those are the beers that I grew up falling in love with. And craft brewers love to redefine. We always want to be the most creative. We're going to change everything. And sometimes you just want to make something so crappy that is beautiful. And I don't know how to put that into the right words, but sometimes it takes less to really produce something really beautiful and drinkable and memorable and nostalgic and all those things. And so, us at Burial, there are the times where we make, dark corn lager with Tuxedo corn, and there are times where we make one of us shall bury the other with torrefied corn from from Minnesota and Wisconsin farms. And I think that's a time. I mean, we talk about this often with our selection of Pilsner malt. Sometimes you're and I don't want to go off the adjunct. I know we're here to talk about adjunct, but it's
I think the analogy is apt, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to remember your audience and what story you're trying to tell with your beer. You can really overdo a beer and lose the audience pretty quickly. And so, if you lack the intention to be okay utilizing ingredients that might be less sometimes, you will alienate your audience. And so I think for us, adjuncts have to be both experientially nostalgic and sometimes creative. And not always. It's not always creative.
You just used the term less, though. Is it less? I'm thinking when you're using
sure.
some of these corn varieties, or some of these rice varieties that you were talking about, these are not lesser ingredients. These are really expensive ingredients, are they not?
Depends on it.
Yeah.
Like we made a wild rice beer, and with Minnesota wild rice, yeah, that's expensive. More expensive than our malted barley.
Right.
But the corn we use for our Mexican lager is pretty damn cheap.
Okay. So, like, what's the, when you're sitting down and you're developing a recipe, how do you start with your ingredient and you build a story, or do you start with a story and you find the ingredients? How does this process work?
It depends on the beer. When we were developing our Mexican lager, it was very much inspired by my obsession in college with Piscitello. Even though, I've had that beer recently and it just doesn't hit like it used to in college.
I wonder why.
But
the beer hasn't changed. You have.
Yes, absolutely.
maybe if you tried drinking your beer in a keg stand, it would taste like your Pacific.
You know what? That's probably true.
Do we have any kegs here? Let's try it out.
So that was inspired by a beer, or at least a memory of a beer, and how it tasted to me then, and trying to recreate that in a way that kind of fits into our Goldfinger mold, which means we're going to spend the time it takes to use the best corn source we can find that makes sense. But with the wild rice, it was a recipe built around the wild rice.
Okay.
We had done some research, knew that it had this really unique nutty and fruity profile.
And does the rice vendor come to you and say, we think we might like this, or how do you discover the wild rice to begin with?
Actually, it was an advertisement in Craft Beer and Brewing magazine.
Oh.
Yeah. Canoe Wild Rice was advertising there, and being from the Midwest and the fact that it's from Minnesota was interesting, because then we could build a very local recipe around it, sourcing ingredients from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois. So yeah, I would say that sometimes adjuncts dictate how that beer is going to be built, and other times it's just kind of a supplement.
Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with that almost 100%. So in the case of the Mexican lager that we have year-round, Robotico, that actually was built around the adjunct, the Tuxepeño corn that Doug had mentioned. Sebastian had kind of brought that to us and said, hey, I've been working on malting this corn. Do you guys want to kind of try it out and see what we can get, see what tweaks we need to make? And we got this corn. We're like, okay, what do we want to do with this? And we're like, okay, let's start a Mexican lager. Let's build it around this ingredient. And we brewed it. Gave Sebastian at Epiphany some feedback. He changed a couple of things. We brewed against it. Okay, this is perfect. This is exactly where we want it to be. And there's other times you go seeking out those adjuncts, and you go seeking out what's going to make this beer special, or what's going to change it. I was looking to do a rice lager with miso, so I went around town looking for people making local miso, and I had an idea for the beer already and a story for that beer, but I didn't have the adjunct, and I had to go out and find it, and found Miso Master. It's like, okay, great. Like, I have a guy around here that's doing this, and we can get it in, and hopefully the beer will hit the way I wanted it to, which it did. Always a little worried using those umami ingredients that, especially in lager, you worry about autolysis being kind of misconstrued there. But it works out, and you go and you find the ingredient, and you tell the story around that.
Doug?
Yeah, I mean, I almost always construct everything like from an experience. It's from like a place. It's very seldom that I'm inspired entirely by a single ingredient and decide to make a beer for it, but it does happen. I actually kind of love how little it happens, because when it does happen, it's very like magnanimous. Like it's like a big moment, and I'm going to talk about it endlessly. But almost always it comes from a place and time experience, Our house Mexi Lager is very much inspired by toes in the sand times with your best friend. I was sitting with my best friend on the planet, somebody I met in the beer industry that I love, and he and I were sitting there, and we were just talking about our fading days and like growing old and near death while we're finishing Coronas on the beach. And I just looked at him and I said, one of us is going to have to bury the other. And then we made this beer. And that beer it can't be.
And John Hall's not even here to... No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, sorry. You asked me up here. If you know anything about me, you're going to get a lot of emotions. But You can't reframe that. It's going to be that place, that taste, that smell, that sea spray, that lime that was on the bottle. And I think that, like, for me, I designed a beer that was intended to be drank in clear glass with a lime in the neck. Like, it's overly sweet because it needs additional bitterness from the lime. I wouldn't put lime in the bottle and like make that beer that way. Like, I want to present it to you the way that I think it's important to be presented. Made our way, aged in an American oak foeder.
Of course.
Which is the element. I always have this like weird commentary about a lot of macro lagers have this like woodiness. Narragansett is this one specific example to me always that I swear to God it's like licking an old oak vat, and I don't know why, but it's just something I try to replicate. So it's, for me, most of the time I'm trying to replicate an experience, and I don't want to recreate it. I want it to be as I remember it, and that's subjective, of course.
Yeah, so
I'm projecting it to everybody else and hoping
what you're
they
talking
also
about
appreciate
is
it.
deeply personal things, and yet you're selling your beer to customers who weren't on that beach, who haven't experienced what you experienced. So how does this translate? How do you make sure it translates?
Man, I think it's like anything. Like if you love something enough and you're passionate enough to put it out there and you believe in it, the customers follow. Like I really truly believe that. I don't know. That's like the creative way, right? So for me, there are beers like that are experiential, and there are beers like Dave Bauer from Farm and Sparrow telling me, "Hey, I grew too much Tuxpino. Do you have a guy that can malt this?" And Sebastian stepping up and me being like, "I can't wait to buy that grain and taste it and figure out how it's going to project in a beer." And that's what we do when those experiences come up. And we made a dark corn lager last year that we all adored at Burial. It was like one of our favorite beers of the year with that blue Tuxpino corn. So I think that it's never, there's no one way about it. I mean, I think if you were that rigid in how you created products, you would probably be a dinosaur at this point, or you'd be like the greatest creator ever. You're like one or the other, and I think that probably 90% of the time it's experiential and 10% of the time it's about the ingredient.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to make beer is to get closer to the earth. We're using stuff that's grown out of the earth. It's the polar opposite of the direction of society and AI and fakeness. It's authentic. So as long as you as a brewer can show the authenticity of how you design that beer and how you brew it, I mean, people are going to adopt that. And I think more and more that's the way that as an industry we should leverage what we do, because we're an expression of what's real.
And on that, if I can pull on that thread, are your customers actually understanding it? I feel like the average consumer, when you say the word corn, they've got one thing in mind: the idea that there might be a blue corn or a red corn or whatever, or rice. Maybe they know about jasmine and basmati, but rice is rice, right? It's a cheap commodity. So do your customers actually appreciate and understand what you're actually doing, exploring the agricultural side of beer?
I think so, because we kind of take advantage of a lack of education to the broader market, because even though these macro lagers do use adjuncts, people don't know that. They don't know that Miller is using corn or Bud is using rice. I mean, people don't really know that. So when we say it doesn't automatically mean, oh, this is your take on a macro beer. It means like, oh, that's interesting. I like to eat corn in my backyard and on Memorial Day. Like, this might taste great.
But do they understand blue corn, red corn? Do they understand these ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I know in the case of like Bloody Butcher, for example, and you talk about the color and stuff, and then it doesn't come out to look like a bloody beer. There's a little bit of a gap there. You got to educate a little bit, but hey, it's a talking point. And when you say Bloody Butcher, that sounds pretty sexy, actually. What's going on there with the Bloody Butcher?
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, with the corn especially, there's a lot. So you have Oaxacan green corn and, Tuxpanio corn and Kentucky rainbow corn and all these kind of heirloom corns that are coming back. And you read about it, or you get them in and you get excited for a second. You realize, I'm not going to get any color out of this. And you put it in a beer description, and then you do have your customers like, well, this said it was going to be red, white, and blue, and this just looks like a Pilsner. And I'm like, well, we're not really extracting any color from this, especially in our process, and it's just not going to happen in a single infusion system. But I agree 100%. It's kind of like an education point, and also the consumer doesn't automatically jump to like what macro is doing. And if they did, they would know like, oh, well, they said there's corn in this, but it's actually corn syrup or it's actually rice syrup. It's not the actual ingredients, which I think automatically kind of sets it apart. The macro guys aren't out there, milling thousands of pounds of corn to make a batch, or doing cereal matches on this stuff. They're just throwing in, syrups and kind of processed ingredients, which, hey, it allows you to make. You don't want to knock it 100% because you're making this super consistent product, and it's always available and it's always right everywhere, which is something to be said for that. But I think at the scale that we're doing it, at least, it's very easy to like throw a post on Instagram with us, with this raw corn or this rice or whatever we're using, being milled, being mashed, and kind of have a little educational point in there and say like, hey, this is what we're doing today. This will be in the tap room in 4 or 6 weeks. Come check it out, and we're happy to talk to you about it.
Cool. Doug.
Yeah, I kind of forgot the question.
Do customers get it? Do they appreciate the nuances of different varieties, and do they care?
Yeah, my head was turning because I was so excited to talk about corn and
malted corn.
Yeah, I think that over the past few years at Burial, our customer base has been less and less interested in grain, which is weird.
Really?
I'm going to be completely honest. I feel like early on, they were very passionate about like seeing different grains and different beers, and it feels like they're so focused on flavor profiles and drinkability than they are on components anymore. And I mean that's like a changing tide of craft beer in my experience, and I think wine too. Like we also have a winery, and so like this is something we've had to come to grips with as well. You don't get to just say Sonoma Pinot anymore. You got to say, oh, it's jammy blackberry wine with medium body and blah blah blah. Anyways, so being more flavor focused has been, I think, an important part of selling beer in the tap room these days. And I think in beer, in bars in general, that you have to be able to like tell people what the product is, especially because the market is just flooded with a million different products these days. So talking about corn as a flavor profile is something that's really important to me. It's by far and away my favorite food on the planet, by the way, corn.
Really?
I mean, growing up in Ohio, it was it. If you ever watched the movie Interstellar where they live off corn, that's like all that's left that grows. I was like, dude, this sounds great. I was like, I could do this shit. So, the delineation between Tuxpanio or Oaxacan or the red corn that J.C. Tetrault at Trillium is like given his life to revitalizing this King something red corn that's absolutely beautiful, and I ate it off the vine in Boston last fall and was like so excited for him that he's doing this because he's going to turn it mostly into whiskey. But I've told people that I would start a corn brewery tomorrow. Like if I got to start over and I got to do my dream brewery, it would be a brewery built on corn.
Where are we doing this?
Corn beer.
Are we in? We're in.
I'm in.
Let's go.
All right, that's amazing.
I'm in for $1,000.
I've always dreamt of doing it because I find from a flavor profile that corn is absolutely, obviously it's delicious to all of us. We all eat tortilla chips and masa shells, and it's in everything. It's literally in everything. And I think that when we sing the praise of the flavor profile that it presents uniquely versus Reinheitsgebot beer, correct? Like you're telling people that they get to try something that is more rich in flavor and nostalgic to them. And I think that and sweet and bright and fruity, and those nomenclatures I think sell beer to a lot of people that you probably don't think about that. So like telling people about the heirloom varietal is wonderful, and I love that, and I want to do that, and I want to tell them the experience they're going to have when they drink it. And I think that's really important from these corn varietals, especially because the corn, I have found the delineation in corn flavor like from a sensory standpoint is vast. Like it is extremely different. So just saying that corn's in the beer isn't going to do it for it. Or rice. Like Anson Mills is in South Carolina. We buy $8 a pound corn from these guys. Or sorry, rice from these guys. It is incredible rice, and it's really hard to afford, and so it's very difficult to put it in a beer. So it damn sure better do something for the beer. And so you're chewing on that rice and you're trying to pull every flavor, sensory element out of it and making a beer for it so that it's worth its cost.
Do these beers always have to be light-bodied so that the rice flavor can shine through, or are some of these rice and corn varieties actually so flavorful you could put them in a porter or whatever?
I've been talking a lot.
Just by function of lack of other qualities that a barley would have, proteins and polyphenols and stuff, you will find difficulty expressing corn as the ingredient in a more robust recipe. And then the question is like, why are you adding it in that specific style if you're just going to be combating, the body, and it might end up being a thinner thing. So there are limitations to. I mean, you could throw it in everything, theoretically, but there definitely are limitations in terms of trying to match something stylistically, whether or not it would be appropriate.
Addition to the beer.
Exactly. I mean, from like a monetary standpoint, you want to make a cheaper porter. Yeah, sure, but you're not going to get that.
But not always a cheaper porter. Like there's expensive.
Yeah, true. But just to continue this corn thing, I mean, there's definitely a familiarity in everybody's palate in the United States of America with corn. So it's not a far departure to add corn into a beer when there is corn in so much. It's like,
is it a familiarity or is it a preconceived notion? I guess, and what I'm trying to get at is that I think that most people's knowledge of corn is limited to one thing, whereas corn is actually many more things than that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit subjective. So we've had in our experience with our Chela Clara, our Mexican lager we make year-round, most people appreciate the beer for its subtle corn expression. But we do call out the fact that we use some corn in it, and we've had instances where people are disappointed in the lack of their preconceived notion of that corn expression. To which we just respond like, yeah, but you just down that 16-ounce glass like nothing.
Yeah.
you still like it, right? Yeah, it's not as corny as you were hoping, but I got an ear of corn in the back if you want. Like that's how the beer is.
Well, and I think that's any adjunct ingredient you use, whether it's corn or rice, or you have a fruited sour or whatever it is you're doing. There's always that little sect of your customer base where you're gonna get that Untapped review where it's just not enough this, not enough that.
People don't like subtlety, do they?
No, they don't. And but I think it's our jobs, and I think that's for any brewer where it's like, hey, the consumer is trusting you. You're coming into my brewery. This is my vision of what I think this beer should be, and I hope that you trust me enough of like, hey, this is my expertise. This is my palate. This is my team's palate. This is what we believe. Here you are. This is a balanced beer that you're going to be able to enjoy time and time and time again, and that's kind of the goal for us. I've definitely had people be like, oh, you said there was corn in this and it's not corny enough. It's like, well, there's a fine line here between me putting corn in this and this ingredient in particular overpowering, kind of tasting like DMS. And it's the same thing I was talking about earlier with using umami ingredients and autolysis. As a brewer, I'm very, very, very conscious of the ingredients I'm using and off flavors, like apple beer. Apple beer is trending again. We're seeing this biggest thing. And in the back of my mind, all I can think is acetaldehyde.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm always very conscious of how I'm using some of these adjunct ingredients and how I'm going to get ripped apart about my by consumers that think that there's an off flavor when there isn't, or something like that. That's always kind of a big concern for me with the adjunct beer. But ultimately I love using these ingredients and being able to be creative with my team and push out beer after beer after beer that's different, despite opinions that maybe I didn't use enough. I would rather not use too much, I guess.
Yeah. Doug.
Yeah, can I be the first person to admit that I love acetaldehyde?
Okay.
I love acetaldehyde. I have a problem. In sensory, I'm a super taster of everything except for acetaldehyde. Every time I was like, it's so green.
Damn, that's so good.
This shit's so good. I was a green apple Jolly Rancher person. Was anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Actually am, but
Yeah, it's delicious.
Grape.
Also, I do appreciate everyone sitting and standing in this tent, and you're at a beer festival, and that's freaking awesome. If you want beer, there's some Mexican amber lager here. If anybody wants some, I just have to offer it up.
I've been admiring the lacing on that beer.
It's a delicious beer. I felt like if you got to sit here, usually when we do talk sessions at Burial, and we do them all the time.
Yeah.
We're just constantly passing out beer because we're trying to lubricate everybody, keep everybody happy.
It makes listening to us more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like I probably answered this question in previous commentary. I mean, I think that corn and rice. I love that we're having a full conversation about corn and rice. By the way, this is amazing. Have such an incredible place in the wild world of beer. They really do. I mean, obviously, Cold IPA was a rice IPA.
Yes. Yeah.
Corn specifically, I find to be incredible in bitters. I also find it to be very, very useful in citrus-driven large IPAs. We've done that a couple times. I did a sorghum.
Really?
I did a sorghum double IPA with Trillium a few years ago. That was mind-blowingly good. Blew my mind.
Is a sorghum because of biotransformation thiols and all that, or?
Oh no, we didn't even think about that. We were just talking sorghum tastes delicious.
Okay, because apparently sorghum is a source of,
and it lends to some fruit, complexity from a berry standpoint, in my opinion. And so we were like, we're gonna play with that. It wasn't a thiol. This was probably pre-thiol obsession of the industry. It was probably in 2020, I would say. Maybe it was right kind of as thiol conversation was really happening. But no, that was a much more berry-driven double IPA. But I think that those beers are incredible. And I slide shit in, and I don't tell people all the time. There is so much rye in our hazy IPA. Don't print this to the public, because people will buy our double IPAs and stuff. I love rye, and the public acts like they hate it because someone told them it's spicy one time. I slide it in all the time. I put rice and I put corn.
What is the rye giving you?
What is rye giving me?
Yeah,
flavor, abundant flavor. I mean, I'm a rye whiskey guy. I adore the brightness of rye as a grain. I think it has it's very berry to me. Wheat is like a flat berry to me. I don't know how to say this in a way. It's like a sweet berry, whereas rye is this vibrant, almost super concentrated berry ester profile to me. And so I love it in those beers, and I also love corn in some of these beers. He's right. I wouldn't make a corn porter, but I would. I do think that there's an opportunity to use more adjuncts in our beer, and it's not because there's a sales point. It's because they have a flavor profile that's unique to them and worth talking about. I mean, these maltsters, like Sugar Creek, they're putting their life into finding unique flavors, right? Stories, of course. The farmland matters. The people that grow it matter. But inevitably, you're creating something that can't be replicated in a lab at all. These flavor profiles come from the earth, from the sun, from the rain, and from the seed. And so when you taste those things, sometimes they just take you to a place where you're like, I have to make something for this.
I was, I think that the average consumer has, again, preconceived notions, either about use of adjuncts in mass market lager, or even in craft beer. They're like, okay, if you put corn in it in a lager, then that means it's a Mexican style lager. If you put rice in a light lager, then it's a Japanese rice lager. How do you break that preconceived notion? How do you put a rice or a rye into an IPA and say this is just an IPA? It's not a rye IPA. It's an IPA that has rye in it, or has corn in it, or whatever.
Well, at a certain point, us craft brewers maybe exaggerate on our education of the consumer. Okay. My rebuttal to that question is like, why do you need to call that out? Ultimately, we're just trying to make really excellent beers, and there's definitely a function of advertising a specific style, particularly if it's a style that's being done kind of across the board from different breweries. That's a way to get people excited. They have a reference point. If you're calling something a Japanese rice lager, people who've had other Japanese rice lagers might be more interested in trying it. But if you're using adjuncts just because of the contribution of body or aroma or flavor, just to make a better beer, I think you don't necessarily have to call it out.
No, I would agree with that 100%. And with you sneaking rye into hazies, I was sneaking triticale into hazies forever. So wheat rye hybrid, yeah, forever. I was like
triticale.
Yeah,
cool.
I love it. I love what it does.
I heard a lot
for hazy, like I didn't love the wheat I was getting for a while, so I was like, hey, let me try something different. And I did, and I fell in love with what it was doing, and there's just a certain little subtle fruitiness that I felt like I was getting from it. But to Doug's point earlier, if you put rye on any beer anywhere, no matter how good it is, the consumer, at least in my market, does not want it anymore. So it's like I could go make a rye pilsner, and it's going to be beautiful, and I'm going to love it. And I've got this Franconian yeast I love from Jasper. It's just going to play so well with it. And I'm going to put this beer out, and then it's just going to sit there. And I'm going to sell, 40 pints a week, and everybody's going to be upset because it's rye, and they had a rye whiskey they didn't like one time. But I sneak ingredients in all the time, but I also try to be as forward as I can. It's something that I had a talk with Doug some years ago, where he was like, yeah, we put everything in those descriptions. So I still, in every beer description, will have every ingredient that is there, whether it's a new flowable all the way down to the grain, and it will be there. But most people read a description on triticale. I don't know what that is. It's the thing that's making this hazy taste nice and pillowy right now.
At least with triticale, most people don't know, but with rye, people think they know. Right?
Right, yeah, for sure. But I mean, even with rye, there's a seashore rye that I really like that I can get from Epiphany. That isn't like very typical rye. It's much softer, and it's much more mellow. But even then, if you put that in there, like that, people just go automatically to, it's spicy like rye bread, and they automatically turn off.
I love triticale. I use it all the time. I didn't even bring that one up. I slide that in. We have a lot of like beers that we make regularly that have triticale in it.
I feel like you revealed a few secrets for us today, so thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's sad. It's tragic that marketing matters, and it does. You don't want to deter people. You want people to drink. So you lay them, you give them a platform, right? You say like, this is an experience you can have. Don't judge it on its parts. Allow it to be its final, entity. And so we try to. I mean, like Phil, my brand director, and I spent so much time trying to thread the needle to get people to our beer, right? From a marketing standpoint, like, are we going to say the right things to make sure that it brings the right customer who's expecting the right thing to this beer? And yeah, sometimes that means omitting ingredients that might set them down the right, the wrong, like, they have a prior experience, like to his point, they drank a bad rye or whatever it is. I've never drank a bad rye in my life, by the way. Rye whiskey for life. And also there's a seashore rye whiskey made by Eda Rhine in Asheville, which is one of the small distilleries in Asheville that I adore.
Next time I'm up there, we have to drink that.
They finish it in Fernet barrels.
Next time I'm up there, we're drinking
Pretty
that.
I'm
awesome.
surprised you guys get so
Pretty
much
awesome.
backlash for rye. Like
We-
in
a ton,
Illinois,
a
like,
ton.
I throw rye on there. They're like, "Oh yeah, I like rye
no.
whiskey." Yeah.
No, if we put rye on an IPA, they think it's Founder's Red Rye immediately. It's going to be malty and rich and all that. So,
Yeah, we can't do that in North Carolina.
well, I mean, here's the point is like, from a marketing standpoint, like, fine. Styles historically have had one or two grains in them, maybe, but we do this shit with hops all the time. We're like, there's 17 hops in this beer. There's 3 hops in this beer. There's 2 hops in this beer. But like, you're trying to build a flavor profile, right? Why don't we think the same way about grain? I don't understand why it feels like grain has to be tethered to tradition, whereas hops allow us to be infinitely open with what we're doing. But we do this all the time. We're talking about creating a melange, right? It's like cooking in the kitchen. And so from my perspective, utilizing these types of grains and these types of adjuncts is no different than the way we use hops. And there are often times where we might have Pilsner barley, we might have 2-row barley, 6-row barley, corn, rice, and some rye. I mean, and we don't really talk about it. We just let the beer style dictate people's perception of what they expect, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing, speaking about tradition, is that if you're a Reinheitsgebot brewer or you're making these German beers, you're trained to think that using an adjunct is sort of less premium, but I literally have in my phone like advertisements from the 1970s in German that were talking about how this beer, this lager beer, is made with premium rice, and it was being advertised as a premium product. Sure, it's not Reinheitsgebot, but we as Americans kind of have this bias that, if you're not using malted barley, at least as American craft brewers, that it's less premium, but that couldn't be further from the case.
Yeah. Okay, so final question. Do you have a favorite adjunct? And I want you to get specific, like not rice, but like a specific rice or a specific corn or whatever. And for at least a portion of the listeners of the show are home brewers. So I really love what Doug said there, where putting a little rye into a IPA can really enhance. So any kind of little adjunct tip that screw the Reinheitsgebot, put a little bit of rye in your IPA or whatever. Here's a tip for you to improve your beer.
I gotta think on that one.
I gotta think of this one.
It's really 2 questions.
Although we've kind of all been beating around the bush, it sounds like we fucking love corn.
I do love corn, but the one thing to remember with adjunct is, if we're going to talk about Reinheitsgebot, it's malt, hops, yeast, water. Everything else is an adjunct. So,
Yes.
like a little tip, if you're making a double IPA at home and you really want to amp it up, just use some sugar. Like, right? It's gonna dry it out. It's gonna, without using malt, it's not gonna be big. It's not gonna be thick. It's gonna get you a nice dry double IPA. So
Any,
even
like,
something as simple as sugar,
straight
is
up table
considered-
sugar,
I use raw cane sugar.
Raw cane sugar, okay.
I typically, that's what I'll use, but just sugar in general, or honey, or anything that you put any syrup.
Fully
you put in,
fermentable.
anything that's fermentable is an adjunct. Fruit is an adjunct. Spices are an adjunct. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Right.
So it's such a broad term to really say. It's not just like corn and rice. We're talking about grains, but adjuncts in general is a huge category of basically everything we put in beer. It's and I deal with that so much. Even in lager, it's like you're starting to see it more, and I'm excited to see it more. We've been doing last couple of years. We do a basil cucumber lager, right? So like that again, we're using these different adjuncts there that you wouldn't typically see in that style, but man, it just hits and it drinks great. But I would say for the home brewer, it's just like I play with small percentages of different malts that don't belong. If I'm just looking at strictly at a grist bill, I play with small percentages of malts that maybe don't belong in the style all the time.
Define small, like 1%, 2%.
Like anywhere from maybe maximum like 10%.
Oh, okay.
But like maybe maximum, but like I might throw a percent or 2 of rice in something, or 4% of corn in something, just to see what I get, see if I can lighten it up a little bit, or to see if it affects how my hops are pronouncing. I play with that stuff all the time, and I think that you just shouldn't be scared of it. I think that that's the only way to learn, is to just especially with your equipment, if you're a home brewer, you're on your system, you're doing your 15th, your 16th, your 20th, your 100th turn. Just your equipment. Start playing with your grist a little bit. It doesn't always have to just be 2-row or 6-row or Munich or whatever you're using, Vienna. You can really play with some of these ingredients and see how it impacts with your system.
Yeah. I would say that at Goldfinger we don't play around with a lot of adjuncts that aren't grasses or grains.
Okay.
In fact, we don't do that at all. So I have a narrow view of it, but I could say from a brewer's perspective, in terms of ease of sugar extraction, ease of brewing, and how it performs in the brew house, it's hard to beat corn. We use it quite a bit. I would say for a tip, if somebody's making a beer that has corn, one of the best things you can do is try to find a non-oxidized corn source. One thing is, there's a lot of really good corns out there that still have their germ in it. They still have oil in there. That oil can oxidize. If you're not using it fresh, it could express in kind of a less than ideal way. It could be a little bit too corny. So try to find a corn source that is either degermed or at least isn't oxidized, and that is easy to work with. And also don't go too far on the other end of like highly processed, because then you can get staling. So when you're using like flaked maize, because it works really well in the mash mixer or mash tun, we actually started our Mexican lager back in 2020 using flaked maize, and I really didn't like the kind of stale quality that the corn had. There was this kind of drying, stale quality. We subbed that for corn grits that are degermed, really easy to use, but you got to perform a cereal mash. And the way that corn expressed itself in our beer was day and night in terms of freshness, but also really woven into the malt expression. So that would be my tip for adjunct brewing.
Awesome. Doug?
I mean, I got to be team corn.
Yeah,
Just gotta stay.
I thought you were going to be team
I know.
rye,
I want to I want to provide variation, and yet I can't tell you how much I adore this crop. Right? It means so much to me. You know what's hilarious is when you fly into Munich and you get a rental car and you drive Munich, you see more corn than anything. When you go to Friuli, Italy, land of the greatest white wines in the world, you see more corn than anything. I mean, that's a part of Italy that serves polenta, right? You can drive all around America in all the great grain places. You probably see corn more than anything, and it's a special crop. It'll probably out-exist humans in some way, and I adore it for that reason. I think that Blue Tux Pinot corn is probably my favorite. If just because you told me I had to pick,
Yep.
I do love it, and I do find it to have just an incredible richness that is irreplicable with anything else. We did a dark corn lager last year that I adored. It was like a Schwartz beer with corn. It was probably our brewer's favorite beer for like 3 months. We also did a collab with Sapwood Cellars out of Maryland, an amazing brewery. That was a summer Bock that we made with that same corn. It was incredible. So I just find it to be so unique. I mean, to his point, it is fresh. It is a fresh corn. The way we're getting it malted, we get it on malt day. We're picking up. We're able to drive over to Epiphany because we deliver beer to our Raleigh place, so we can coordinate the way we want to get it picked up, and we can use it pretty fast. But we've just loved being able to use that grain. I mean, honestly, I could say this about any corn that I work with. There's a different, presentation of flavor and aromatics with every single one, but I enjoy it. Even flaked maize. It has a nostalgia. It has a place for you. He's not wrong. He's definitely not wrong. But I'm also the guy who will eat the rubbery, stale tortilla chips because I love old oxidized
Me too,
corn,
depending on how much I've had to drink.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you for your time. I am amazed that we didn't have a bunch of corny jokes, on this Adjunct episode.
I'm very happy we did.
Before we go, share your social media so people can figure out follow what you're doing.
Goldfinger Brewing Company at Goldfinger Beer on Instagram and Facebook.
Wooden Robot Brewery at Wooden Robot Brewery, Instagram. Find us there, and all our links are on there.
We are Burial Beer Company, and we are at Burial Beer on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Drink
Thanks,
Adjunct
Andrew.
Lager.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
My thanks to Don, Tom, Chris, and Doug. My thanks to Todd DiMatteo and the good folks at Good Word Brewing for hosting All About Beer during the Little Beers Festival. He set the date for Little Beer 7 for April 17th, 2027. I highly suggest putting it on your calendar and planning to be there. Next week, it's another conversation from the festival that you won't want to miss. But in the meantime, you can always reach me on email at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. Make sure you join the This Week in Rauk Beer group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauk Beer on Instagram. Upload your photos, join the conversation. And you can support us by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support, and I hope you will. When you're at the website, poke around, read the new content, read the archives, and follow all of the links to follow All About Beer on social media. If you like smart audio content, a reminder that All About Beer has a separate podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Listen to shows like Brew to Brew, which is now a weekly show, the All About Beer podcast with Don Tse, and M. Sauter. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday. The BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And on this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo. I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.